My guest today is Zarina Zabrisky. She is a journalist and filmmaker who has covered the Ukraine war since the very beginning. Her documentary, just released this weekend, is called Kherson, Human Safari, and it chronicles the plight of the city of Kherson from the initial Russian occupation and the liberation of the city to the current daily Russian war crimes of the human safari. Okay, let's go.
Conflict, politics, military-industrial complex, technology, war. The Flash Traffic Podcast.
Is being back in the United States weird?
Oh, so weird. Well, I'm in Dallas and it's very hot, so I don't get to see any of Dallas. You can't be outside very much, but it's
Yeah.
okay. It's all right. It's just like my heart is in Ukraine, and with everything that's going on, it could be a tropical island, and I wouldn't be happy. I just want to go back.
I guess my first question would be, why did you stay in Kherson,
Thanks, Anthony.
given the danger?
Brilliant question. I mean, well, if someone doesn't want danger, that someone stays out of Ukraine. Anywhere in Ukraine is dangerous. So it's just a matter of degree. And I am not a volunteer. I am not anybody other than a journalist. I am in Ukraine right now in the capacity of war correspondent. So the danger is a part of my job description. And I'm not considering places based on the risk factor. I'm considering for myself personally a place on how well it is covered. And Kherson, historically, due to many factors, was not covered well in the world press throughout this world.
Mhm.
So partially it was, I suppose, a conscious decision, but only after the spontaneous decision based on a feeling. Because as I've told many times in many interviews, I've arrived to Kherson first time on the they say Liberation Day, but it was technically 3 days after the Liberation Day. The Liberation Day was on 11th of October, 2022. And no press was allowed.
Mhm.
Few journalists made it in, lost their accreditations. I went like a good one with this infamous press tour where everybody was there fighting for the space. I fought well, elbowed people out, grabbed on my seat, and arrived in this little thing that hardly could be called a bus. And I just totally fell in love. That was love from the first sight, hands down. There was this atmosphere of total ecstasy and elation. And if any city was ever seductive in my life, that was Kherson at that moment. And then we didn't know who will be arriving. We heard that Vitaly Kim is arriving, and then suddenly out of nowhere Zelensky arrives, and everybody is running and crying, and the anthem is playing, and this was like the most unforgettable moment in my life. And I had a very eventful life. Okay, so it wasn't like so since that moment I wanted to keep coming to Kherson. And it wasn't a happy moment either, because that moment that Zelensky arrived, Kherson started to be bombarded because Russians were there for 9 months. They occupied Kherson. It was the first regional center occupied, for someone who is not right now aware or needs a refreshment. And once it was liberated, the Russians decided to take their revenge. And they started to pummel it. And I believe you were a witness yourself of what's happening there. And it just only was on increase since then. And the more it was pummeled, the more I wanted to come and stay and film it, or initially write a book because I'm a writer. But I also, by that time, co-produced a documentary. So I realized that for this war, the more immediate medium is film, and hence the film. And then I came and I stayed, and the rest is history.
Did you think that on Liberation Day that Kherson was going to become so dangerous because, like you said, Ukraine is dangerous. The UN says that Ukraine, I think, Yemen are the two most dangerous places on the planet. And in Ukraine, some might disagree with this, but I'm pretty sure Kherson is the most dangerous city in Ukraine. So basically, doing the math, Kherson is the most dangerous place on the planet, most sustained danger. Because it's just, as you know, and as your documentary portrays, you're getting bombed all the time, whether it's glide bombs, artillery, grenades dropped from Mavics, or FPV drones. It's just nonstop. It's nonstop. What? So, talking about your documentary, the title is Kherson Human Safari, and I'll put the link in the show notes so anybody can go and watch it. Let's just watch the trailer. I'll share the screen and we'll watch the trailer, and let's just check this out.
Началась война. Обстріл, просто какой-то хаос в городе. Всі хотіли воювати, були готові воювати там з лопатою, з ножом, з палкою, з охотничьим ружьем.
Ну, вот тысячи херсонцев на центральной площади.
Вообще жесть, вылезли на русский ВТР.
Я тоже не бессмертный, но не страх, а злость.
По ночам ходили, стреляли просто потому, что пьяные были.
С той стороны не выпускали поехать в Херсон. И под автоматами.
И теперь такой, знаешь, такой свобода.
Весь город, грубо говоря, это большой тир, а ты в нем мишень.
Ребята, кто же взорвал? Зачем взорвал? Русские взорвали. Ого! Ебать!
Сафарі на людей йде. Здається, як дуже багато бджіл. Насправді це дрони. Не спіли, може кинути.
Они говорят, что они победили нацизм. Нет. Они забрали его себе.
Пока мир спит, мы здесь умираем.
Yeah. So the actual documentary itself is about like an hour and 15 minutes, maybe?
It's 72 minutes,
Okay.
yes.
72 minutes. One thing that stood out on this, that when I was watching it, was there was a scene pretty early on, I think, in the documentary where they're driving to, I guess, a convenience store to show the damage. And I don't know if you took this footage or I just assumed you were taking the footage. But you crest a hill on this wide Volitsa, this boulevard, and you can see the river right there. And it's a straight shot between the river and the Russians and you guys parked right on this high point. And for me, that was the most nerve-wracking thing in the whole documentary, because FPV drones and Mavics dropping grenades and glide bombs, that's scary stuff. It's really dangerous. But snipers, you never hear them. It just happens all at once.
Yeah.
Boom, and it's over.
Well, I mean, yeah, it was me. I was, I was following these people's story for so long that I became good friends with every one of them. I love the whole city. I love all of them. And so I was actually visiting my friend who cooked dinner for me, Olga, the lady with the different color hair each time she appears. She's very colorful and a very fantastic lady. She's a poet, an anarchist, a former punk, but she runs a very successful, or formerly very successful grocery stores, family grocery stores chains in Kherson. And so she cooked me a wonderful dinner. And you can't go back because it's curfew. It starts around 8. So if you go and visit someone, you stay over. So I stayed over, and about 3 a.m. we are getting phone calls from the people who live nearby the grocery store that it was shelled again. It's not the first time. It was flooded, it was shelled. And so once the curfew is over at 6 a.m., we jump out, we jump in the car, and that's the first time that she's driving in snow. She never drove her car in snow before. So she's already, like anybody who's driving on the icy road, it's nerve-breaking. That's why she's so tense. Not because of all the other terrible circumstances. And the river is there. It's not that far from my place, actually. By that time, the snipers are already removed from there. The snipers were pushed back. They were across the river the first several months after the liberation. By the second winter, they're a little bit further away. There's still mortars and tanks and all kind of anything that flies from there. There's not just FPV drones, there are other type of drones. So it's still extremely dangerous. They can see you. But that's the thing. When you live in Kherson, and I became one of those people living in Kherson, you should get used to it. You're taking your chance. And yes, most people don't come close to the river. I can't come close to the river because I don't have a permit. It's not allowed for journalists to come close to the river. I can only come to a certain point where it's allowed. So we are actually driving along the street, which is this the border where I can still legally drive. Down there, I cannot go anymore. So
sorry to interrupt you. Speaking of that, before I forget, did you know a journalist named Bogdan Bitik? He was the Ukrainian journalist that in April of 2023 he was sniped on the near the Antonovsky Bridge.
Oh yeah,
with I think an Italian. The Italian journalist made it out.
Yeah, of course, it's a very famous thing. Well, I mean, they made a mistake of going near the bridge.
Right.
I mean, that was their decision. But if I went near the bridge, I would be shot too. You choose you choose your risks. There's like, if you're in Kherson, you can die every minute of the time. But Anthony, I mean, that's life. You can die. I hate to bring it to everyone, but you can die any moment of the time anyway. So it's just more probable in Kherson. But then you just being reasonable and not go in certain places or not doing certain things, which will cause this reaction. Certain things are not sensible. Although, again, the definition of sensible here is a little blurred. So, but I had purpose. I've seen, and I like, you're a journalist and you've just been there, so you probably make these choices too. We have a story to tell. For me personally, if I need to film something for my story and I'm not breaking this country's laws, or I'm not doing anything which will have my accreditation being taken away from me, I will follow the story. If it's just a bravado or something, just to say, oh, I've been in Bakhmut or I've been on Antonievsky Bridge, then it just, and it's not necessary. So you just follow the story, and obviously going with Olga to her store was following the story, but also just being with my friend, there to help and comfort her.
The documentary doesn't just talk about what's going on now, which is extremely important that people know what's actually happening, because I call Kherson the city that the war forgot, because it was, back in late 2002 when Liberation Day happened, it was a big deal. everybody was pretty excited about it across the world. It was the turning point in the entire war, or at least we thought at the time. And then after that, everybody was trying to recover, and it turned out that the Russians were not going to allow that. And it just went downhill from there. And your documentary tells the story of from the occupation to the liberation to, the trials after liberation to the Novokakhovka Dam being blown up by the Russians, and then the river floods. And then there's bodies floating down the river that are, inflated from rigor mortis or whatever. And then after all of that, the human safari starts in earnest with drones. It just seems like everybody forgot about Kherson, but it's terrible. So hopefully, your documentary, people can watch it and realize just how terrible this is, what the Russians have done to the city.
Exactly. You just summed it up so well. It's biblical to me, like also when people are asking me, why did you decide to make it about Kherson? I don't see any other city anywhere else. We just went through this whole biblical epic disasters series from fire to water, the biblical flood, to fire again, come falling from the sky, raining from the sky. Now they actually have locusts. You won't believe it. But yeah, like seriously, yesterday I read on Telegram that there is a locust all over Kherson. So,
but of course, it's Vagina.
And I'm not a religious person, but I like to read, and I love Bible as a book. And I was like, what's with it? And to a writer or to a filmmaker, it has this symbolic value and added allegorical sense. And this is what I hope my documentary can do, in addition to just being a history record. And a lot of materials were then transferred to Human Rights Watch committee and the United Nations team, and they were doing their own investigations, but I just gave everything I knew to them so they can research it. And they came up with their conclusion that human safari qualifies as war crime and as a war against humanity. So that my film is documenting the war crimes, but I hope that it also has this eternal added value in the sense of a fight between good and evil. It is more than just some local conflict. It's definitely not that. There is this Lord of the Ring sense to it. And you, I don't know if you felt it, Anthony, but when you're there, you almost can sense this darkness coming from the other bank, because Ukraine itself, to me, has this elevated, joyful, hearty feel. They like to celebrate. They have this joy de vivre. And then from the other side comes this Mordor overwhelming darkness that you almost see moving towards you. And that's what also I hope translated into my film.
It was scary. It was like a ghost town with people that seemed to be zombies, but there were people, amazing number of people walking around doing day-to-day things that I thought was crazy. That these people, because even in the center of the city or even closer to the river, people were still walking around. People were going to bus stops. People were walking and we weren't walking around. We were driving like crazy. Like, we were driving from point A to point B as fast as we could go. No seatbelts, because you got to jump out of the car if a grenade hits your car or an FPV drone. I think what you said, biblical, really describes it well. If I may, go ahead.
Just very important here, because, and I respect a lot, your courage to go there and to document and report. Thank you for doing that. Not many actually do that. Many say they do, and they never get to the center of the city. And However, if you're there just for a few hours or for a day, you don't get the sense of the city. As one of my colleagues, a local journalist, most courageous young woman ever, said, Kherson lives underground. And not only these people are walking around, I'm getting goosebumps as they speak. Each time as I speak about it, I get goosebumps and I'm overwhelmed. Like yesterday's news update on Kherson Telegram channel read, the temperature running in 34 degrees centigrade, low-cost invasion, 2 people killed by FPV drones, several injured, I don't know how many, 16 buildings. The theater season is closed, officially closed. That's because until yesterday, the main theater in Kherson, was given regular premieres, which people are coming to see in the bomb shelter. And that's just one of the theaters. There are poetry readings, music concerts, they're playing board games, there's an English club, there are fashion stores. I've been to a rave party. And you get there running for your life. And sometimes when I did the mini work premiere, not really a premiere, but a work showing of my film for people in the film and the crew in Kherson, several people couldn't make it to the screening location because they couldn't make it from the car to the door because the artillery shelling was so bad. And when we stepped out, everything was on fire around us. But life goes on, and like I always say, these people are incredibly athletic. The gyms are open. Yoga studio in my film, actually very sad. The lady, the most cheerful, optimistic woman in the world, the one who speaks about the ordeal of the yoga studio, which was turned into a torture chamber and then mined, and it goes on and on and on. And she keeps the spirit and she cheers everybody up. I was the student in her class. That's how I know. And so a few days ago, she was under attack from an FPV drone and she lost a part of her palm. She was injured, and she's still optimistic. She's now what she does. She can teach temporarily. So the other girl stepped in, and she's just posting the videos from before, advertising to like, come to our studio, we exercise. So yes, Kherson is undefeated, and you don't see it if you just come there for a day. That's my major point. These people will never surrender until their last breath. They are undefeated.
One lady in the documentary, her mother died from the obstrel, from the shelling. Then her husband died right after that when a Russian shell hit his car, and he was trapped inside the car. It's just terrible.
Yeah, well, not just that. I was there at the time, very close, 5 minutes walk from the place where I was, the central grocery store nearby the Freedom Square, the major grocery store. It's like the heart of Kherson. So, and he was closer to the river, so about 5 minutes from there. And so his car was hit and set on fire, and he burned. All she had left is this wedding ring. And I went to see her right after that, the same day. And she was sitting there, and yes, her mom was killed by a shrapnel piece a few months before then. And then her house is burned, and she had to move to another part of Kherson. She wouldn't move from the city. And now she joined the army. She joined the army to fight. These people are invincible. And not every story is like this. I didn't even have to go far and find the stories. I mean, in fact, what I had to do, I had to cut a lot of stories out of my film because the film is only going for so long. I could have made a year-long documentary because every single person in Kherson has this story that needs to be told.
Absolutely. Every person that I spoke to in the city had just either a tremendously tragic story or, they are there as volunteers helping people going into danger. One guy had lost both of his legs in a grenade from a drone, from a Mavic. He just got prosthetics like a week before, and he was just learning to walk on them. And he showed me the video of the drone, because the Russians post these videos of the human safari. He showed me the video of him getting his legs blown off by a drone. It just amazing. I don't know. It's hard. It's almost impossible in my mind to fully describe what's actually going on in this city. And it is historic. It is, when you think of like seriously bad things that have happened to cities and people, like Sarajevo, the siege of Leningrad, where people were eating other people because it was so bad.
I was born in Leningrad.
You're born in.
My great grandparents on one side are buried in Ukraine in Babin Yar. They were shot by the Nazis. They're in the mass grave in Kiev. And on the other side, they were all Jewish, and they starved to death, and they're in a mass grave in Leningrad. And yes, I mean, since we are, you're talking about people eating people, I can add that one thing I heard from surviving relatives, that my ancestors were eaten by rats. And so, maybe that is a part of my personal motivations, since I lost all my ancestors to genocide and to the Nazi regimes, which now is inherited by the Putin's Russian Federation. I feel very natural being in Kherson and fighting for the city. In fact, it's really the fate's irony. My great grandfather made the first film about Holocaust ever made in 1938. It's called Professor Mamluk, and it's officially the first film made about Holocaust. So, I don't believe in any anything supernatural, really. I'm a very materialistic person, but maybe it gives me the feel of my duty to tell the story of the city even more. But even without that personal story, I still would be driven as a writer and a journalist and a human being. Somebody needs to tell the story.
Mm-hmm. I don't think the visual medium is capable of capturing what the city actually looks like when you drive around the city, what it looks like today. Because to me, it's the glassless city, like the misto bez vikno, the city without windows, because they're all boarded up or they're blown out, and every other block has a building that's completely gone. Maybe a week before we got there, they had hit the administrative building, the White House, with 2 glide bombs. And when I saw it, it looked a lot worse a week later than it did in the pictures in the newspapers. They must have hit it again, or it crumbled or something, because it looked a lot worse when we drove by.
They deteriorate, they fall down. Usually pictures are taken by local journalists all the time, but the ones that made it in global press are taken on the day when it happens. But what happens next? Bad weather happens, winds happens, and more explosions and shock waves happens. And so these buildings keep crumbling, and there's no way to restore anything now. Because the drones are there constantly, and it's very hard to even restore the power lines. And it continues on a daily basis, Anthony. The day before yesterday, 12 houses were set on fire by drones and burned down by the river. And several people from the film and my friends were trying to put out the fire all day long without water, because the Russians also break down the power lines and the water supply. So they have to extinguish fire with soil and sand. And as it goes, it's also very hot there, and their clothes are burning on them. And I mean, every morning I wake up expecting to hear something horrible happening to one of my friends, and sometimes it happens, and it's a terrible feeling. I have to say that it's much better and easier to take when you're there. When you're there, you just call, and I don't know, I can't explain it, but it's not as scary. When you're physically away, I'm in the States now, I had to visit for some personal business because I'm American. I haven't been here for a long time, but I can't wait to get back to feel more calm about it because it's a paradox.
Yeah. It is ironic that on the shores, the city's right on the shore of one of the largest rivers in Europe, and they can't access that water because they would be killed probably pretty quick. If you're on the shore by the bank, on the right bank, your life expectancy is probably about 30 seconds, I imagine.
I not really, because like I said, the snipers are not there anymore. The closest drone pilots nests, as they call them, they're about like maybe 5 kilometers away, because because of the geographical composition and the unique build of the Dnipro River in this area. They have what they call plavni, and these are little isles, basically the little isles covered with reeds. So it's not like you have the bank and the body of the water right away. There is the swampy area, which makes it very difficult for the Russians to storm back, and they're storming all the time. Every day they're attempting to get Kherson back, and they attack in the islands in the middle of the river, and they're trying to cross, and they're being killed. And as it was described to me by multiple military and by the military administration, the river is teeming with the Russian bodies. But also it makes it equally difficult for the Ukrainians, for the military to cross and get to anywhere on the Russian occupied territory. As you probably have heard about Krinky. So that was the whole ordeal. A part of it was the swampy area, because it was very hard to get through.
Yeah. I was in Mykolaiv right before I went into Kherson. I was with the 38th Marine Brigade, and they told me lots of stories about Krinky and the islands after that, trying to hold the islands that you were talking about. That will also go down in history as one of the operations from this war that not a lot of people know about, that the Marines had crossed the river, stayed there for 8 months, trapped on the beach, basically on the left shore in Krinky.
Yeah, I know a lot of these people. They are heroes. If you can see heroes alive in this life, these are those. And I was lucky enough to interview some of them for the forthcoming book, The Chronicles of War. I did the first volume. It's the team of Ukrainian journalists put together month by month history, year by year. And so I was in the first one. That was the second volume, 2023. And so that forthcoming volume, I'm covering Krinky. And the interview that I did with 2 young officers who were in Krinky and working on the operation there was the hardest and the most intense interview I've taken in Ukraine. And I've taken hundreds, literally, of interviews, including those of survivors of torture chambers in different assaults and storms. The Krinky, it was just hell on earth. Literally. And it was forthcoming in next fall in Ukrainian, but I'm sure there will be translation, and I'll do everything to make sure that the story finds its place in history and finds its audience. It's just really unbelievable.
It is an amazing story, and we talk about Bakhmut, and we talk about the invasion of Kursk. And those, are Avdiivka, all these highlights of the war. But really, the part of the war that anybody would want to make a movie about are these Marines. I think there were, from all the brigades, there's about 5 Marine brigades in Ukraine. I think there were pieces of all the brigades, or at least 4 of the brigades. These guys are trapped in a small town across the river. They can't cross back across the river. The entire, Russian army, basically in the south, are pushing against them, trying to dislodge them out of holes in the ground, cellars, for 8 months. It's amazing. And the Russians are using artillery. They're attacking with armored vehicles, BMPs, BTRs, tanks, all the time. Drones dropping bombs from the VKS is dropping bombs, glide bombs into these guys. They can't leave. If you get hurt, they can't come get you. They can't bring water across because you can't just row your boat across the Dnieper. Impossible. It's under observation the whole time. So eventually they start sending drones, the vampire drones, with water and ammunition. But if you get hurt, it is a major operation to evacuate. It really, Creaky is probably the most amazing story out of the war so far.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of amazing stories.
Yeah. And that's, so much to cover. I mean, there's so much material there. And, once you start digging, you find more and more. Like for anybody who wants to more stories, there's Nikopol, for instance. I don't know if you've been to Nikopol, but it's a small town close to Zaporizhia, and it's the number 2 for human safari. They have it as bad as Kherson. It's located 6 kilometers across the river from Zaporizhia nuclear power plant station. You actually see it from Nikopol. And Nikopol is much smaller than Kherson. I forgot the population, but it's like less than 100,000. It's a small town. We used to have some factories, and now, just because of this proximity to the Zaporizhia power plant, they are making it another polygon for the Russian drone pilot to train on. And I went to Nikopol. It's a pain in the neck to get the permit to get to Nikopol. Almost impossible. I had to do like serious magic to get this permit. Once you're there, nobody wants to talk to you. They're all scared. The administration, people are more willing to speak, but any officials, they all know you go speak to him. No, you all go speak to him. And it's impossible. I managed to find some good people who gave me some statistics, but basically it's an untold story. And there they have, that was, when did I go? I went in November 2024, and there were FPV drones flying inside the windows and following people through the doors, which is quite rare in Kherson. It's been seen in Kherson and reported, but it's not common. But in Nikopol, people reported it to me. Oh yeah, like the drone just broke through the window and is coming in. I saw and I filmed those windows. There's the story for you right there. It's not easy to get there, but it's not easy to get anywhere if you want the story. But the same goes for, say, Sumy region. Sumy is the part which is very close to Kursk area. And so there's all the villages close to the border. This is something else too, because there's no river to separate the Russians from the Ukrainian positions and Ukrainian villages, and they just incinerate them. And there's ecocide going on. That's a big subject, and nobody is writing about it, because they fly FPV drones with incinerating explosives, and they set on fire forests, and the forests are burning. And then the animals are killed. And of course, the villages are being completely turned to ash and stuff. And the villages, well, I went several times. And last time I went, there were still some people living there, but they were pushed out of there and everything is burned. That's another war crime waiting to be discovered. And, when people say that they don't know what to write about, or like, why did you decide to write about Kherson? Heck, I mean, just don't sit in Kiev. You won't find a big story in Kiev sitting in a bar.
We call them fobbits. So fobbits, like hobbits, but people that stay in the forward operating base and they never go outside the wire. Those are journalists that go to Kiev, or academics, journalists, government people that go to Kiev or Lviv, Odessa. That's not the war. Like even Kharkiv, you could say Kharkiv is not really the war either, but Kharkiv is a war city, so I'll give it to them. But you're right.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not judging anyone. All kind of stories and presence needed. And the larger, stations, they won't allow you to go to a place like Kherson. In fact, I was offered a job with a major network, but that wouldn't allow me to go where I want to go. So it's not for me. I prefer to be freelance. I have a lot of respect to people they reach bigger audiences with their stories. There's a place for everyone, for everyone's report, if it's truthful in this war. But I was referring to, I guess, like I spoke to several people and I had several questions in interviews lately asking, like, how do we find a story? All the stories already taken. That's what I'm trying to say. That is for those young or studying, not young necessarily, but journalists who are looking to go to cover Ukraine. There are plenty of stories for anyone.
Yeah.
All you have to do is to be curious enough and, follow the story.
It does take some time. It takes a lot of time to, I call contacts are the realm, the coin of the realm. You have to build up contacts. You have to know people. You can't just when you were covering Nikopol, I was in Sumy and Kursk. So November and December, I was in Kursk in November, not in December. But you can't just, a Western journalist can't just roll into Russia. You can't just do that. You have to know people. You have to know things. You have to know the country. You have to know at least a little bit of the language, either Russian or Ukrainian. Probably Russian helps more than Ukrainian, if I'm being honest.
I don't know. I don't think so. I think, I've been there for 3 years and I'm fluent in Russian, but I've learned Ukrainian and I'm fluent in Ukrainian, although I speak with mistakes, but I understand everything. I read it. I can even write it. It's probably horrible to read and painful, but Ukrainian are very gracious people and they take it. For me, Ukrainian, I don't know why we are giving advice to suddenly, but to get over with a couple of things. Learn Ukrainian. That opens many hearts and many doors, and it's fun. It's good.
Yes.
I love speaking it. I enjoy it, and I don't enjoy speaking Russian. It's it's a different. We're not going to go into linguistic debate right now. But also, I want to say that be careful about what you're saying, where you've been. I've been to many places that I would not admit on air because the Russians are also hearing you, and they're listening to all of us. And be careful with what you're saying, because I have cases in France who suffered consequences of admitting of where they have been. Some stories could be told, but it's probably not wise to admit who wrote them. Some stories need for now to stay anonymous because the danger and the risk of Russians going after journalists is real.
Mm-hmm. Also, it helps to learn the language because you may find yourself in a place where no one speaks English. Believe it or not, there are plenty of places in the world, but especially in Ukraine, where if you didn't speak Ukrainian or Russian, you couldn't feed yourself, basically. We were speaking about the Marines. We were speaking about the river. Let me play one clip from your documentary. And this is, just to tee it up a little bit, this is after the Russians destroyed the Novokakhovka Bridge. And it was on 6 June, I think, 2023. They blew up the bridge, flooded the entire Dnipro River. The Russians were not rescuing people on the left bank, their bank of the river. They weren't rescuing them, though. They were setting up ambushes to ambush people coming to rescue the other people. And this is a part of the documentary where the armed forces of Ukraine are risking their lives to get across the river to rescue trapped civilians. And I'll keep the sound off. You can read over it as it plays and tell us what's going on. I'll make it big and keep the sound off. So just about 30 seconds of the flooding and the rescue. Houses literally floating down the river.
Yeah, well, this is an incredible scene that the military Odessa Territorial Defense Brigade shared with me. It's exclusive footage. And you see two priests being rescued from the island that got completely flooded. And they were building there a small summer camp with donkeys and cows and like a petting zoo for families with many children, so of course all the animals got flooded, and there were other people who I believe were not found, at least according to these people. And so they're saying only 2 of them are left. And this is just one of many episodes. And this subject is not yet covered very well. Later in this episode, we're talking to a priest, Father Nicodem. That's Olga, once a very inspirational person in the film. And so Father Nicodem is sharing the terrible details of the funerals he had to perform after sometime after the tragedy happened. And he's not very graphic, the film is not graphic. It was intentional. It's not gonna offend your feelings. I was attuned to sensitivities. The goal is not to shock and not to focus on horror, but the story is being told, and he's just telling the real truth of what was happening, what happens when there is no transport and where there's a lot of death. And that is not good. And also when the occupational authorities are basically preventing people from burying their loved ones, and what happens in terms of mass graves and stuff. So mass grave is one of the constant motifs in the film, unfortunately. And again, you're not going to see anything graphic, but it's there.
Yeah. 12 Days in Mariupol, which is another documentary about the war, I found
60 days.
Oh, is it 60 Days in Mariupol? Sorry. I found that film extremely graphic, especially with child death and children being injured and stuff. I thought that was really over the top. But yeah, let me ask you. Go ahead.
I just say, well, I thought it was a good, honest movie, and they did not shy away from shocking, because that's how Ukrainians live. Nobody is trying to save them from being shocked. I didn't show most of what I've seen. Like in the place where I live, in every corner of the yard, I've seen a dead body or body part, or I have this memories stuck there. Like I walk down the street and there are pools of bloods and stuff like that. But there's no point for me in the movie I made to make a massive shock to the audience. That wasn't my goal. My goal was to show, while showing it and beating and registering all the war crimes by Russians, my goal was to show the beauty of Ukrainian spirit. And that's why we have this dancing soul of Kherson, the allegorical dancer. But she's not allegorical. She's just one young woman who lives in Kherson, as you find out later in the story. If you start watching and wondering what's with the dance, I didn't bring the dancer. We didn't, from someplace else. She's just someone whose actually day job is not a dancer, who to whom dance helps to survive.
Right. Let me ask you this, and I think I know the answer, but I want to hear what your take on it is. Before the occupation, there was roughly about 200,000 people that lived in Kherson. Now they think it may be as high as just under 50,000 people still left in the city. You might have a different number that you're working with, but why is that? I mean, this is like you said, place is hell on earth. It doesn't get any more dangerous than this. Why do 50,000 individuals still stay in the city?
It's pretty impossible to put a number on it, with like the numbers I had before, and that might refer to the region. It's about 300 or 360, but that's like the one with the suburbs, like it's always with the city, you have the satellites, so, give or take, but it was much bigger. And now I got the official number 60 to 80,000 fluctuation, because sometimes people leave and they come back, and I see it happening. It's true. Why do they stay? Well, it's their home. But there are many answers. Number one is practical, pragmatic logistics. When you don't have money, where do you go? It's easier said than done. And then your average Westerner with some level of build-up security, right, with well-being, with some bank account and some savings, can imagine moving from one place to another, find another job, right? But it still would be a headache and would still require some additional resources, right? Now imagine you don't have any savings because for the last 3 years your country was at war, all the businesses are closed, you lost your house because it was bombed, you don't have it, you live in some rented apartment for which you still have to pay, and then the services and the communal services are still high. And ironically, during the occupation, the Ukrainians in Kherson didn't have to pay the communal services, but once it was liberated, they actually had to pay the outstanding fees for and some businesses couldn't open again because they owed all these amounts. But the communal services need to get these payments in order to continue. So there are all these logistics issues, right? So you're broke, there are no jobs. Where do you go? If you go to another city in Ukraine, the rent is not free there. The rents are going up. They're very high in Odessa and Mykolaiv. And you are used to, people in Kherson lived quite well. You had, like some of my friends had this immense mansions, I would say, by the river. When we're talking by the river, we're not talking about little huts. There are some huts but they're very comfortable huts in villages. The Ukrainians know and can live very well. Everything is very well done. But there are these mansions, and suddenly you give up your mansion and you go share a school gym with 50 other families. And most of them have dogs and cats and animals. They're very pet-loving nation. And they are not leaving their animals, with very few exceptions. They're taking all their animals with them. So, and then you have kids. How do you do all this? How do you feed your family? You get $2,000, which is okay, I'm terrible with math. It's you get, say, $200 a month. And that's all of this is going towards rent. How do you do it logistically? But that being said, and that's a serious consideration, right? There's this sense of pride, and basically it's resistance. By staying, their resistance, because a lot of people in the film are saying, if I leave it to Russians to come and occupy again. And we just fought them for so long. It's ours. One of the Marine brigades, the 34th, they have a little crab as their, the patch symbol. And on their coat of arm. And I just listened to their little program today. Today's 7 years since this brigade was founded. And so there was a little show about them. And they were saying, why did they pick up a crab? And that's a little bit tongue-in-cheek and a little bit of a joke, because crabs, they grab on something they have and they won't let go. That's theirs, and that's how they are. And also crabs live on water and on land. But that's the sense, with the Ukrainians, that's theirs. Why should they give it away? And I totally get it.
Yeah, it's just like when Hurricane Katrina came through New Orleans, the people that had to take refuge in the stadium, it was terrible. It was terrible. Then you're like, why didn't you just leave the city? But they just didn't have the means. Do you think that when I see what's going on militarily, and that's kind of my focus on this war, is the tactics and the operational movements of the war. When I see things like tanks doing indirect fire across the river, when I see 152 millimeter artillery being shot from the other side of the river, and I watch in other fronts, in other areas, those same artillery pieces would be destroyed instantly. If this was Pokrovsk or if this was Vovchansk, or if this was Sumy, those pieces of artillery, the same ones that are attacking Kherson today, if they were in other places in this war, they would be instantly destroyed by either counter battery artillery or Ukrainian drones. Do you think the AFU, the Ukrainian Armed Forces, or the government in general is doing nearly enough to help Kherson? And this gets back to the city the war forgot.
Great question. And I have to put a disclaimer there. I'm not a military, right? So you know better about these things. My impressions are just from my own experience and what I hear from people in Kherson and from the military in Kherson. I interview a lot of military. This is something that we can do sometimes because I have a lot of videos and interviews with the brigades who work in Kherson region, not just in Kherson. And that's I'm writing a series of articles for Euromaidan Press. I'm their war correspondent, so drone technology in Ukraine. So I interview different brigades and do videos and articles about the technologies and so forth. It's very interesting. But yes, they do a lot. From what I understand, again, not as an expert, but by a journalist who interviews a lot of people, one of the major reasons they don't do indiscriminate bombings or shellings of these places is because the Russians are using Ukrainians in the occupied areas as a human shield. Ukrainians are not Russians. They are not going to drop bombs on villages where their relatives basically are living. And Russians make a point of living, surrounded by the civilians, by Ukrainian civilians. So that makes it very, very difficult. And so that's the whole other subject. But how do they do? They have to have precision weapons to take out those nests of pilots or artillery points. And they do, they have HIMARS and they target them, but it is more difficult than say in this, and I worked in Pokrovsk and in Sumy region and in Kharkov region. There, when the Russians are moving forward, there are very few people left in the villages that they capture. Most of the time, they just erase settlements from the face of earth, and there are no living beings left. So Ukrainian military can hit back and not worry about whoever is there other than the Russian soldiers. This is definitely not so in Kherson, Zaporizhia region. There is a densely populated area, and a lot of these people are trapped there. They don't want to stay there, but they can't leave for various circumstances. So that's the major issue, I believe. And then the other part is the resources and the lack of weapons, the lack of anti-drone defense. I've interviewed Mr. Prokudin, who's the head of the military administration, and he's deputy, and right now his new position. Anyway, Alexander Telekonikov, many times. I work with them constantly, and I work with the military. And of course, there's not enough money. There's not enough weapons. They need more, and I speak about it all the time. I went to the Bundestag twice with a list of things that they need. I will be going to Washington if I can. I'm looking at it now with a list of concrete things that the military there need. Yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, it seems like I was having lunch with a partisan fighter near the airport, just outside of town, outside the city in Chernobyivka, famous airport. That's another war story, another amazing war story that there's already a documentary, at least one, about partisan activity. Anyways, he said that out there, and it's probably 20, maybe 15 kilometers from the river, maybe 20 kilometers. He said he used to see throughout the last year, maybe one Russian drone a month. And now he's seeing one Russian drone a day. and this is the suburbs. This is way outside the city. So the technology is getting better, the Russian technology. And they have not, as I think you mentioned it earlier, they have not seen a lot of fiber optic drones,
It's changing.
as it was told me.
Because I was there in April working with several brigades, and we talked about fiber optics. And I will share today. I have the little report which I didn't have time to share. Speaking about fiber optics on the Ukrainian side, Russians, according to the commanders at the time when I interviewed them, were not using them as much as they do in the east or as they do in Sumu region, where the fields are covered with fiber optics. I mean, they're horrible scenes. Just think about the environment damage. But that was not the case in Kherson. But by now, and I speak to people every day, I have several contacts and I speak every day. By now, they started to fly into Kherson on fiber optics and as far as Tavrik or Shuminsky region, and this is not downtown anymore. So, it's like about maybe 10 kilometers in. So technology, as you know, Anthony, changes every day. No, maybe not every day, but maybe every week. They change in frequencies. Now they're bringing new detectors, right? Like before, we used to have just Tsuki rock type. And I had Arrakis, which was a little bit more evolved, but it was just an audio thing, and you could just read this tiny little screen on my Arrakis, which I bring with me. It was pretty useless because it could be somebody's Wi-Fi, or radio, and you could just use your judgment. If there's too many of them, okay, I better not walk to the bakery right now because it looks like.
Right.
But now they have the new types, which is called Ziga and Hoover, and they have a little screen. And as one friend of mine said today, we are watching cartoons, and those cartoons are the Russian drones. So what they do, they intercept the Russian video, and they can see what the Russians can see. So I'm watching with my friends. I'm not sharing that. They don't need to know about, so there, like, the fact is it's developing daily and weekly. And we are in the full-blown, the series that we call for Euromaidan is Drone Fair. That's Drone Fair for you. And whether this word will hit and become a part of vocabulary like human safari did, I don't know. But for me, it's clear that drone fair or drone warfare is the future of the war.
Yeah, we had, talking about detectors, we had, we call them sugar cubes.
Zuckerrock,
and ours was a total piece of garbage. If we could even get it on to detect drones, that was a miracle. But it's changing. It's getting worse. What do you think is the near term, or maybe also the far term? What's the future of Kherson? What's the future of this city that the war has forgotten?
Well, first of all, I hope that the world will remember now with my documentary, because I am dedicated to driving it far and wide. I'm already showing it free on the website. It's in public realm. Anyone can watch it. I was going to go a traditional way, distributors, festivals, but you have to wait. You have to wait 6 months or a year. This can't wait. And I decided, screw it. The city is being erased every day. And this is not a commercial project. I'm not looking at making any money. Whatever money is being made, if somebody wants to donate, is going to Kherson, to restore the houses, to help the families, or to buy these goddamn detectors. But the main and primary goal is for the world to remember. Exactly. So it's not the city that the war has forgotten, that is remembered. And I'm hoping, being like Kherson optimist, being contagious, and me having caught the vibe, believing that altogether, with your help, Anthony, thank you so much for going there, for bringing it to the people of the world, for having this conversation with me, for working on that in general. And all the other people, there are many of us who are working together to trying to break the silence again around the city, that we can change the situational awareness, the reputational awareness, and that the city will come just like, say, with other places on earth, when the protests in the street, like Free Kherson, Save Kherson, and then the politicians who only care about their ratings start paying attention and do something, do something. So that's my hope. Now, whether my hope is realistic, I do not know. We, in the Ukrainian best spirit, we have to try and we have to do our best, and we have not to think bad outcomes, because if we do, we can be defeated. As one Jewish fighter from the Jewish unit of the Ukrainian army told me in Uman, and Uman is the hometown of my ancestors. They were Ukrainian Jews from Uman. And he told me, the victory is already here. It's here. We just don't see it yet. So I remember that he said it to me in 2022. But I believe that will happen. I believe that Kherson will stand. Kherson is definitely Ukraine, and they will rebuild, just like Olga in my documentary says, we will rebuild. They will. If anybody can, these people can rebuild.
Well, I hope so. And thank you for keeping this alive in front of everybody, and not letting people forget what's actually happening there every day. Koshin Dane, they are killing people every day. They are maiming people. They are burning things. They are you called it a polygon, which is a testing, training range for Russian pilots. This is absolutely one of the most. This is Irpin, Bucha, Izum level stuff that's going on here. It's terrible, and it's happening every day. So, Zarina, thank you so much. The website to view the documentary, and I will put this in the show notes, it is Kherson Human Safari, Kherson, humansafari.com. It is a great documentary, and it is touching and disturbing, and for me personally motivating. So thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you so much, Anthony.
The Flash Traffic Podcast.